Welcome to my virtual art show titled Folds and False Caves. This show was hung at the Arts Pay Gallery in uptown Waterloo, Ontario. It is a collection of my recent oil paintings that examine relationships between inner and outer spaces, caves and openings, indoors and outdoors, bodies and nature, in order to question the relationship of self and other. This first image was created by combining two reference photos, one of my friends suspending herself between two trees in the forest, and another of folds of hardened lava from the surface of a volcanic island. The stripes of paint at the bottom fill out the taller image for my imagination. I started the show with this image because it seems to show the figure crossing between spaces. The lighter gap showing the forest behind her suggests that she is moving from outside to inside, or between two outside spaces. The figure herself is one of the most active in the show, clearly making an effort to maintain her position, and maybe even move the ground or trees around her. I also like that it looks like the figure is part of a giant eye that she is endeavoring to open. Whether a door or an eye or a gap, the painting seems like a good entry point. The figure in this next painting, if noticed as a figure at all, is a representative of passivity, helplessness, and ephemerality. The title of the piece is Creature. The way I see it, the piece of ice at the center bottom is some sort of upside down animal, frozen into the glacier. This was done from a single photographic reference. All the reference photographs for my paintings are taken by me or occasionally a friend. The ice creature is suspended between the dark inside of the glacier and the sunlight, and has to move with the movement of the glacier, changing forms constantly. This next piece is from a combination of three photographs: a glacial pool, a spider's web, and a colorful fall forest. I upped the transparency of the forest image in Photoshop in order to make it just the hint of color across the surface of the web. The web, with the spider in the middle, brings the focus to the surface between inside and outside. It is a place where neither space is seen clearly, but the eye gets lost in the intricacies of the web. It reminds me of the viewpoint I have while meditating, when my mind is on the surface of my own skin and my eyes are aware of the spaces around me without actually focusing on anything specific. One among many, which is next, is about letting go of control when I see the complexity of the world around me. I think of it as something of an opposite to the first painting in the show. I'm an anxious person who worries about unexpected things happening. Maybe this is why I want to see how things are connected together, so nothing is uncertain. I want to let go of the control, but keep seeing how everything works. If I identify with the figure in the ice, and also view the painting as a whole, I have a sense of both power and release. This painting's title, Fold, references most closely the idea of folds, which the show is partly named after. It is Gilles Deleuze's philosophical vision of all matter as one sheet, with folds that are different beings forming insides whose definitions are constantly changing. The question behind this painting is, how can I show an inside and an outside space that are clearly part of the same flat-ish sheet? I am trying to show that boundaries between inside and outside, and thus self and other, are hard to define. Window shows an inside space that is defined by its relationship to the outside that is looking in. The boundary between the two spaces is transparent, just thick enough to show the concavity to enclose the viewer. Our movement starts at the nearest pink-colored chunks of ice. This is also a glacier image. The space both opens and closes as the eye moves back. To me, this represents skin as the boundary, from which our minds move both out into the spaces that aren't our bodies, and inward to how we envision what is inside of our bodies. Window is these two spaces overlapping. Door of Dreams presents a similar movement through space. The nearest surfaces are the abstract pink parts around the edge, representing our view of the boundaries of our flesh. The eye then moves back to both dark recesses and bright holes with sunlight coming through. For me, this painting visualizes the moment when I partially wake up from a deep sleep. At such moments, I open my eyes a little to see the room that I am in, but I can still see the landscapes that I was dreaming about if I try. So the inner landscape of dreams seem to be opening in the same direction as the outer landscapes of the waking world. In Engrained, the viewer looks from the outside, not the inside. Again, the boundary between inside and outside is transparent. Like the creature trapped as an abstract piece of ice, the falling figure seems frozen and obscured by the pattern of the bark. The agency belongs to the flicker perched on top. Although this is an older painting than the rest, I have been thinking a lot recently about how I view my body in space, trying to make my awareness an outside entity that looks back at my smaller self. Another reason I included Engrained was because of how it went with a new painting. Both show a bird acting as an agent at the boundary of the human and natural worlds. The natural world in all my work is symbolic of all that is other than myself, not just the non-human. Unlike in Engrained, the new bird comes into the space of the viewer from the outside. This painting is called Desiring Machine because it reminds me of Deleuze's term meaning a collection of parts belonging to different entities that interact fueled by a desire to combine, break apart, or change one another. He describes them as breaking old flows and creating new ones. The relationship between the nuthatch and my hand tangles outside greens with flesh pinks, creating unfamiliarity. We don't quite know what we're looking at. I've talked about focusing on the space that is the boundary between inside and outside. The boundary is the flesh that the viewer's eyes move away from into both inside and outside. It is also the surface spanned by the spider's web, where the fall colors outside are only a faint glow, and what is inside, below the ice lake, is obscured. This next painting plays with literal focus by combining two photos with different focus so that only the roots at the edge of the hole in the cave are crisp. In my most recent paintings, we see the figure more fully. I'm thinking about the domain of the self, how large or small it is in comparison to its surroundings. I'm dealing more directly with emotions and trying to evoke desire by getting more movement into the brush strokes. Self-Contained talks about bodily urges, but it also talks about the way my habitual thoughts cause me to see myself everywhere around me. Outside spaces fold inwards. The original inspiration for this painting was the figure that faces both inward and outward at the same time, but the enclosed space on the right became more important as the painting developed. After finishing Self-Contained, I was aware of my desire, when I had originally envisioned the project, to find a true outer space, unconfined by the habitual views of self. So I tried to move outward a step and see how the space of that painting could fit into a larger universe, with an edge that made a true outside clear. The result is cohomology. It is named for the hole amid surfaces that connect to one another in complex ways. While working on the original Self-Contained, I made a larger version of the same image with looser marks and brighter, more primary colors. This painting has mostly the same ideas, but with fresh detail to add to the interpretation. I plan to make a third, or fourth, painting in the series where the space wraps like a physical object around the figure, while remaining an outside rather than an inside. My current series that we just saw feels a bit like a return to some previous works, which are next in the show. These are a diptych, lines of flight, and balance. They visualize different amounts of control that a person can feel over their surroundings. I included them because they talk about the desires behind how we deal with our relationships to what we feel is outside of us. Surface deals specifically with the seemingly conflicting desires for self-definition, uniqueness, and connection to other things. Surroundings shows a more contemplative approach, with the figure mapping out a pattern from the inside space, using strands of color from the outer world. It is a tribute to my husband Oliver and the way he thinks about theoretical structures. Finally, I present a simple metaphor. The title is Inspiration, the cave representing the inside of the mind. Thank you for watching. If you have questions or want to talk to me about my art, please email me at artyarts@gmail.com or visit my website, www.artyarts.com.